Alright, so this is going to be the test really quick. Sorry for you guys on YouTube and Twitch if anybody happens to stop by during this point in the recording. But I'm going to try and do a podcast because I want to start putting those on YouTube. However, with Anchor, I don't really have a background on it per se. So we are going to try it this way where I can record through Twitch and then come back to this. So I'm hoping it's got my voice in here. So if you guys hear me echo, I'm sorry. It does. Okay, perfect. So we will go ahead. I'm going to leave Twitch up here just in case anybody happens to stop by. I doubt anybody will because I'm not saying I'm live. I'm not announcing anything. I just wanted to do a podcast and I figured this would be the easiest way to do it for both YouTube and for Anchor because, well, Anchor is the one that puts it out to Spotify and everybody else. So let me get Anchor set up here really quick. Give me just a second and then we will get started. Okay, so there's that. So I'm sorry, you people on YouTube, you're getting raw footage today. But Anchor, if you ever want to listen to it where you don't have to see this background we're about to put up, it'll spread it out to Spotify, Stitcher, the usual podcasting spots. But today we are going to cover essentially my thoughts on free agency. I'll probably redo the intro here in a second once I hit record on the Anchor one. So give me just a second here. Let's go ahead and get, this is how long? An hour? Okay. So this should work. This is what you guys are going to end up watching for the podcast. So enjoy. All right, let me get Anchor set up here. Okay. So what's going on, everybody? It is Money Mike here. And today we are discussing the NBA free agency. Most of the big signings are done. Really the only one left is, I don't believe AD has officially signed his contract yet, but it's pretty much more or less set in stone that he's staying in LA. I kind of was waiting on the Bogdan deal to go through and to see that. And I also was kind of trying to stall to see if Boston was going to get a sign and trade for Gordon Hayward. But unfortunately, that deal's not done yet, and we had just started to hear rumors, I believe yesterday, that they had considered doing it as a sign and trade now, before it was just an outright signing. So I'm going to do one conference today, and then I hope and plan to do one conference tomorrow. I can't promise that I will. I believe we're going to start with out west, just because out west, I feel like some teams got better, some teams got worse, and some teams it's not their own fault. But the main team we're going to start with is one of the teams that I thought had a really good offseason, and that was Phoenix. Phoenix added, when healthy, a top-tier point guard in this league who's going to bring a veteran presence and a playoff presence. I know Chris Paul hasn't necessarily been the greatest playoff performer. However, he has that type of mentality, and he's had teams that have had championship aspirations, and he's had teams that have gotten pretty close. And I think Devin Booker needs that right now. I think the Suns just as an organization need that right now. I know that initially Chris Paul had been rumored to look at the Knicks and teams like that as far as just getting them that playoff and championship pedigree. And I think it's a really good thing for Phoenix. I think if you want to keep Devin Booker around, you had to show him you're serious. And by bringing in Chris Paul, who I believe is 34, that is without a doubt showing that you're serious. Their draft pick, I didn't watch a whole lot of college basketball this year, unfortunately. But just kind of what I had seen, I felt like it was a reach from everything I had seen in podcasts I had heard from The Ringer and other people that just even the little bit of game tape I looked at, it seemed like they reached a little bit. I had thought the same thing last year, though, with Cam Johnson, and Cam Johnson turned out good for them. So maybe they picked a little bit more over need instead of BPA. I personally would have gone BPA because, Chris Paul's not going to be there forever. It would have given him a good chance to have somebody sit behind Chris Paul, learn from Chris Paul, learn from Devin Booker, learn from the vets on this team, and then eventually hand the keys over because Devin Booker is still pretty young. So I felt like that would have been a better situation. But overall, I do like their team. I love the Jay Crowder signing. That's exactly what they need. 3-and-D guy. When Crowder can hit his shots, and he did that in the bubble. Didn't necessarily do it in the regular season, so we'll see which version of Crowder we get in the actual season, I guess I should say. Next thing I want to talk about is another team that's very active. It is the Lakers. Lakers did a lot of different things. The big one was bringing in essentially almost a whole new center rotation between Harrell and Dwight Howard, or not Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard left. Marc Gasol. The Harrell one, I'm still not sure. I've never been a big fan of Harrell. He's an undersized guy. He's not necessarily going to be in your closing lineup, so I think he's more of a regular season acquisition. I don't understand it for Harrell either, as far as why. I feel like this is going to tank his value, if anything, because when the Lakers start going deeper in the playoffs, when you're getting your minutes reduced for Marc Gasol, who's in his mid-30s now, I don't feel like that helps your value, and centers just don't necessarily have the greatest value on the market anymore, just because the influx of centers and just how it's such a ball-dominant league now. Centers just don't get paid unless you're going to Detroit. But I do like the Marc Gasol one. I feel like they got him for a great price. I feel like you can kind of coast with him a little bit during the regular season. I'd obviously like to see him play closing minutes just to kind of get a feel for LeBron and AD and kind of gel with them first. But as far as the rest of the regular season, honestly, LeBron, AD, Mark, I feel like those guys should coast. Let Schroeder, Harrell compete for that 6-man of the year title and just kind of coast into the playoffs and then play your 8-man that you're supposed to play. They brought back KCP. I still don't understand why KCP is getting so much. Maybe it's because he's a clutch client and that's just what clutch clients get paid. But I don't understand how you keep having to bring KCP back for double digits for, I think this is 3 or 4 years in a row now. The other one's the Schroeder trade. I like it. I don't necessarily love it for OKC at least. I feel like to get Schroeder for that pick and giving up Danny Green, who it doesn't seem like they wanted to keep anyway, it makes a lot of sense. Adds that point guard role that's kind of been a hit or miss for them. I know LeBron plays your primary point guard, but through the regular season, you can't trust LeBron to play it for all 72 games. You're going to give him some games off because he's going to be carrying you at that point guard role in the finals. The Wes Matthews signing, I'm actually really surprised they got him for the vet minimum. I guess it makes sense for Wes just where he's at in his career, but given some of the contracts going around, I thought he might be able to get a little more elsewhere. But for the vet minimum to replace kind of that Danny Green role, that's actually a pretty good signing for them. They did kind of lose a lot defensively between Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo leaving. Rondo, you probably weren't going to get much of him in the regular season. He was going to cause more head scratchers than anything else. He's a really bright guy. He's just on the tail end of his career and needs to pick his spots a little more, and he does that in the playoffs. And he showed that this year in the playoffs, being a scrappy defender, helping with that Avery Bradley, since Avery Bradley didn't play in the bubble, obviously, helping with that role and really coming in when it mattered. They also did lose Avery Bradley to Miami. I'll talk about that when I do Miami, because I'll do the Eastern Conference as a separate segment. But eventually at some point you need guys out there that can defend. And he could do that in spots, and I don't know necessarily if you replaced him or Rondo at the level of defense that they had. The Dwight Howard walking, that's fine. Like I heard, I'm trying to think who said it. I believe it was on one of the Ringer podcasts. They brought in Marc Gasol as an adult. They got rid of Dwight Howard, who doesn't necessarily always act like an adult at times. Dwight Howard, don't get me wrong, he's done at least a little bit of growing up since the last couple of stops he's had. But Marc Gasol is a proven vet, a champion, and he just brings that adultness that LeBron's going to want in the locker room. I think him and LeBron will butt heads about midway through the season or so, because Marc Gasol isn't one that just goes with the flow. He's going to call you out, and when LeBron does that whole complaining on defense of blaming somebody else because he didn't rotate, Marc Gasol's going to call him out on it. I think they will butt heads on that occasionally, but I think in turn, LeBron's going to understand where Mark's coming from, and he's going to understand it's coming from a place of he wants to win. The Markieff Morris signing, he's not going to play a whole lot for you in the playoffs. At least a little bit he'll play. Surprised you got him for the minimum considering what his brother got. I'll get to that here next because I am going to cover the Clippers next. But all in all, I feel like the Lakers did a good job, and I feel like they did get better compared to what some of these other teams did. But now we are going to get to the Clippers. The Clippers, honestly, feel like they lost a stride. You didn't get Schroeder. Kawhi's still asking for that point guard. You guys haven't gotten that for him yet. Pat Beverly's great, but he's not a ball dominant guard that's going to be in your closing lineup as a playmaker and a decision maker, and you're making Kawhi do that, who can do it. It's just I don't think he wants to have to do it. I think he wants to go back to more of a San Antonio role where Tony Parker's the one handling the ball and he can kind of pick his spots. I do like the Serge Ibaka signing for them. I think it was absolutely necessary because Zubac should not be playing in closing minutes in the playoffs. Serge, again, kind of like Mark, is an adult. He's been around the block. He's a champion. And he's going to be a good two-way player for you. He might not necessarily be able to stretch the floor perfectly, but he can stretch it enough. And he's not going to be a liability like Harrell was on the defensive end. He's going to provide those defensive moments. But as far as the rest of it, I feel like the Marcus Morris, I feel like they just kind of had to pay him just because of what they gave up for him to New York. I wouldn't have paid him that money. I saw that deal, and I honestly thought it was one of the 3 worst contracts that I had seen this offseason. You gave him way too much time on that deal. You gave him way too much money. If Kawhi and Paul George walk, you're essentially looking at him as your franchise player, and nobody wants to do that unless you're apparently the Knicks, which was only for half a season, but still. I don't see how, especially when his brother signed for a minimum. Maybe it's because he won a ring and he wants to stay, but I don't understand how you have to pay Marcus Morris that much money. But other than that, I don't really have much to comment on the Clippers as they really didn't do that much this offseason. The next team we will cover is the Rockets. I like the idea of bringing in Christian Wood. I like the idea of bringing in DeMarcus Cousins. DeMarcus Cousins, when he's healthy, is still a decent player. He's not going to be Sacramento. He's not going to be New Orleans boogie. But we saw a little bit when he was with Golden State that if you just ask him to dominate for a couple of minutes every couple of games here and there, he can still give you that. I don't know if he can still give you that after this last injury, but I feel like once every 10 games, you give him about 5-6 minutes and let him do his thing, and you let Harden sit on the bench for a little bit. And that's when Harden gets his breathing minutes, and you let DeMarcus Cousins do his thing. Because he is still, at least to some extent, going to still be that player. I like the Christian Wood signing. I feel like it's kind of a win now, kind of a build for the future, a little bit of both, because he is still so young. And you guys, I believe they gave him a 3-year deal. We're still obviously waiting to see if they trade Harden or Russ. Honestly, once I saw the Rocco deal, I assumed it was done. I assumed that when Rocco left that Harden, Westbrook, or both were going to be done within a week. And so far, we haven't heard anything yet. We did briefly hear about the John Wall for Westbrook the trade. I don't really understand how that helps Houston unless they're getting a first out of Washington, because you're picking up a bigger deal and a worse player at this present time. I like John Wall more than Russell Westbrook just because of what he gives on the defensive end, but he hasn't played in essentially 2 years. And Russell Westbrook at least has played, and he might not look great all the time, but in the regular season, he has his moments where he looks good and it gives Harden a break. And that's still kind of what you need on this team if you're going to have Harden as your main guy. I still think that Westbrook needs to go in order for Harden to flourish, but they've kind of lost some pieces around the edges, so they definitely got worse this offseason. I don't really see a way they got better other than maybe they got some bigs, but the fact that you gave up Robert Covington for 2 firsts kind of suggests to me that you're looking to rebuild. Now we're going to go to the team that Robert Covington went to, which is Portland. Portland, I feel like, did a really good job this offseason. They are clearly showing they are win now mode, and they don't want Dame to leave. I still think CJ's got to go. I've been saying that for a couple of years, though. Just never been a big fan of the backcourt. They can't defend together, and is both short. But Dame's getting older now. You got to go for it now. You just saw Houston's getting worse. A couple other teams that will still cover are getting worse. And honestly, at this point, you just got to go for it. It's just what it is. I kind of see why they got rid of Whiteside, because Nurkic is back, and that's what Nurkic does. Nurkic is just a better player that's going to give you more meaningful stats. Still would have liked to see them add a little bit more, maybe at backup guard. Not necessarily trusting Anthony Simons and Gary Trent and guys like that. I still think their closing lineup is going to be a damn good one between Zach Collins, Nurkic, Rocco, Dame, CJ. I still feel like that's a really good closing lineup. I just don't know necessarily during the regular season if you get little knick-knack injuries, who's going to step up on that team and be your leading scorer if Dame goes out for 4 or 5 games, or if CJ goes out for a couple of games. I don't know who necessarily steps up to that role of those players. But other than that, I really like it. They brought Rodney Hood back. If Rodney Hood's anything like he was before that tear, it was a good deal. Harry Giles, you might as well. You had the cap space. It's just a quick little prove-it deal. If he turns out for you, he turns out for you. And if he doesn't, then oh well, it is what it is. The next team we will cover is we will go ahead and cover Dallas. Dallas, I like the idea of the Josh Richardson trade for Seth. I mean, granted, you're losing one of the best three-point shooters out there. It's apparently just a Curry thing that they just shoot threes. But I do understand dropping a little bit in the three-point percentage to add that defensive boost, because Josh Richardson, without a doubt, is a better defender than Seth Curry. They also picked up Trey Burke. They kind of added a little bit more at backup guard than I thought they would. Between Trey Burke, Jose Barea, which he's kind of on like the Udonis Haslem type stint, I think, of you just get it until you're done. Would have liked to see them make 1 or 2 more moves maybe, especially with Porzingis. I don't believe he's playing for the start of the year. The Willie Cauley signing is interesting to me. I didn't watch much of Willie Cauley-Stein in Dallas last year, but I don't know necessarily if he fits what they need. I think they need a more defensive center, because Luke is getting there in defense. He's just not quite on that level yet. He's still got plenty of time to figure it out, as he is still really young. I just think that they needed to go with a more defensive-minded player at that position. Next we'll go Memphis. Memphis, I didn't really see much improvement, much really happened there. Kind of just kept with what they got. Lost Josh Jackson. And other than that, didn't really necessarily surprise me with any moves. I think at some point you do have to pull what Atlanta pulled this year and what Dallas is pulling. You have a superstar, essentially, or superstar potential guy, I guess I'll say, in Ja Morant. Just one Rookie of the Year. This guy can take you places. And for you to not try and capitalize why he's on that rookie contract might come to bite you later. You saw what Atlanta did this offseason. Saw what Dallas is trying to do, at least with bringing in Porzingis and then trying to do the other trades here and there. But all in all, I think that they need to start making some moves here soon. I don't know what those moves are currently, but I do feel like that needs to eventually be something that they consider. And then the next team we'll go to is Minnesota, I guess. Again, didn't really necessarily do a whole lot. Kind of brought a lot of guys back, made a couple of trades to get rid of James Johnson's contract, things like that. However, just you got to really hope Anthony Edwards clicks on both ends of the ball and actually wants to play basketball. I guess let's start there. Because with Cat and D'Lo, you essentially have no defense whatsoever at all. The other thing I'm kind of surprised with, I mean, granted, this is a couple of years ago, but Robert Covington would fit great on that team. You just need players that don't necessarily need the ball in their hands, can play defense, and can shoot. Don't necessarily know how they got better. I feel like they're going to be towards the bottom of the West. Here in about a week or so, I'm going to wait for a little bit of preseason to start and kind of watch a couple of games to see how teams are fitting. I know it's not a great imitation of what teams will look like, but I want to at least see something as far as these teams on the court and how they look. Another team we'll touch that I think is going to be at the bottom is going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder. Shout out to let's start this part with shout out to Sam Presti for just doing his thing. Honestly, the fact that you got all of these picks everywhere. I guess the one criticism on their offseason is I thought they would have gotten more for Kelly Oubre. Don't get me wrong, it's a good package. You still technically got a first out of it. That's essentially going to be 2 seconds, but I thought you could have gotten more. I don't know, maybe if it was just his last year of his deal or exactly what is causing it, but I still think you could have got more for him. Bringing in Al Horford's interesting. I kind of hope they're able to do what they did with Chris Paul. I just feel that Horford being paid as much as he is, you don't necessarily know if you're going to get that return that you got in the Chris Paul type situation. Because Chris Paul was able to handle the ball, obviously, because he's just a guard, and there's more demand for high ceiling guards than there is high ceiling centers, especially at that age and that contract. But I do, again, like the fact that he got all these picks. It's just a main decision of how do these picks turn out. If they turn out, great, you did your job. If they turn into mediocre picks, not necessarily the greatest, but hey, you did what you could with the situation you were given. Another team that kind of made some interesting moves is New Orleans. New Orleans brought in Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. Got rid of Drew. I kind of see what they were doing as far as, obviously, I mean, if Milwaukee's going to throw you that offer, you do it. Every time. Even if those picks end up being late, if Giannis signs his extension, it's still essentially 3 first and 2 pick swaps. You still do that deal. Because you're still going to be able to flip Eric Bledsoe if you realize you're towards the bottom of the conference. Like, I don't know necessarily if they'll be towards the bottom, but they'll probably be 9 or 10 seed, I think. But you still at least are showing Zion that you're not wanting to bottom out and get him a bunch of young guys. The Eric Bledsoe and Lonzo thing is interesting because I don't know what Lonzo's worth anymore on restricted free agency. Because you see all these guys getting max deals. I mean, granted, most of them, I think, right away deserve it. Tatum, Bam, those kind of guys, I think deserve it right off rip. No questions. But like Donovan Mitchell, like those kind of guys, I feel like they're going to get more of a Jamal Murray treatment of we give you it and hopefully you make those improvements to where it just works. But yeah, I don't see how that team's competitive in the West, just with how the West is. But I think they are still built for the future. You've got Brandon Ingram, you've got Zion, you've got those young guys. I think if the season goes bad, they may start a fire sale. They may start trading off Eric Bledsoe, JJ Redick, guys like that. It just kind of depends on how their season goes. The next team I want to talk about is Golden State. Golden State didn't necessarily do anything to make themselves worse. It just unfortunately happened to where Klay is going to miss the season. We did get that confirmed that Klay is not going to be in the season, which is unfortunate because I, without a doubt, missed seeing Klay and stuff on the court. It's honestly a lot of fun to watch. But I feel bad for Steph because this is going to be another year that he struggles, I think. Because just kind of looking at what their projected lineup is, if Wiseman starts, I think Wiseman was the perfect fit for them. Even with the Klay news, and with teams not necessarily wanting to trade up and give up a whole lot, I think Wiseman just made the most sense. So with their lineup, I don't know. I do like the idea that they got Bazemore in for the minimum. I do like the idea that they got Brad Wanamaker to come off that bench. And bring in some veterans to at least get them through the regular season. But with, I'm assuming Wiggins plays your 2, Oubre plays your 3, Draymond plays your 4, Wiseman plays your 5. Dre's taking a step back on defense. We know that much. Wiseman's still young. He's going to make rookie mistakes trying to play at the next level because he only played 3 games in college. Oubre, not the world's greatest defender. He's got size and length. We'll see how it happens. And Wiggins has gotten slightly better, but he's still Andrew Wiggins on defense. He's not what we all thought he would be coming out of college as far as a two-way guy. So that means you're leaving Steph with some mediocrity shooting and mediocrity defense, which I just don't know. I understand that Steph is still in his prime technically, but I don't know eventually if we start seeing ankle problems and things like that come back up again to where, because he's having to carry such a load offensively to keep this team in shootouts, I don't know necessarily if he can handle a full season. But I'm still kind of not sure where I'm going to put Golden State. I do have to see some preseason games before I determine if they make the playoffs or not for me. The next team we'll cover is Denver. Denver got worse. That's without a doubt. You lost Jeremy Grant. Jerry Grant. Jerry and Grant's the point guard. But Jeremy Grant, who was good for that team. At his price, I wouldn't have brought him back either. And it seems like he wanted a bigger role. We'll see how that goes for him in Detroit. Best of luck to him. But I wouldn't have paid that much for him to stay in Denver. You re-signed Millsap, which is a good thing, as he's going to be able to keep that veteran presence in that locker room and keep them on task and on target and focus on the task at hand. Losing Mason Plumlee for them might end up being a bigger thing in the regular season, as he was kind of that backup to Jokic, giving Jokic breaks and kind of helping him get through that regular season. Wasn't as good as Jokic, obviously, but he at least brought a big body to that team. But yeah, they definitely got worse. I don't necessarily know where they go from here to get better, as I don't see anybody available to where they can get better. The next team I guess we'll talk about is San Antonio. San Antonio, I can't imagine them not being sellers at some point this year. This team has clearly run out of traction. Popovich is towards the end, and the West is almost as difficult probably as it's ever been. And this team just does not have the firepower to keep up with it. I like their young pieces. They need to start going into that full development tank season type mode. They're going to be one of those other teams that's towards the bottom of the West. So they need to trade LaMarcus, trade DeMar, and just start over. Next team we will talk about will be Sacramento. I understand not re-signing Bogdan. You had Buddy Hield complaining about minutes. The team is just not sure what direction they want to go, because every time they try for a win now, it bites them in the ass. But De'Aaron finally has that extension, so you got to keep it going. Between De'Aaron, Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, those guys, you have to start winning at some point. I don't know when that is, because given how tough the West is right now, honestly, again, they're one of those teams that's probably going to finish in the 9-10 range, for me at least. But yeah, I don't see where they go from here. I wish the best of luck to them. But I don't see how they get any better at this point in time. I don't know where they go from here. The Harry Giles thing didn't work out, so I don't know where they go from here. A lot of these teams kind of just made sideways steps. The last team there is really to talk about is Utah. Utah, again, sideways step. You brought back Derek Favors. We're still waiting to see if Rudy Gobert gets an extension. I wouldn't want to pay him that money. It's just me. The center market is flooded. I understand he's up there, but he's also up there in age. And I just don't see how you pay him that much in this market, especially with Donovan Mitchell getting his max already. But again, I think hopefully Mike Conley comes back to a little more Mike Conley and a little less of the transition year Mike Conley we got. And if he does, team should be a playoff team. But yeah, so that is every team in the West. I will do a playoff predictions some point in the preseason, and then here in the next couple of days I will do my thoughts on the Eastern Conference. But yeah, that has been my prediction video, and kind of just my grades of looking around. So it's kind of a quick recap. Not many teams got better. I think the Lakers, Portland, Phoenix, that's really about it. They got better in the West, honestly. The big losers were Denver, the Clippers, OKC, obviously. And yeah, that's really it. So that has been the podcast. Again, like I said, it'll be up on Twitch, YouTube, Anchor, and all of those. So that has been the podcast. I appreciate you guys for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. And peace.